Hi, everyone. This is Deborah Hamilton, and I am talking with Jeff Grognet. I have to tell you, he's a veterinarian who crossed over to the holistic side of veterinary medicine to help educate veterinarians and pet owners about exploring holistic veterinary medicine. I have to tell you, this is the most interesting discussion I have had, and I can't wait to hear what all of you think. Let's hear what Jeff and I had to talk about now. Hi, I'm Deborah Hamilton. Welcome to my podcast, Why Do Pets Matter? 10 years ago, with my iPhone and a script, I recorded the first episode of the Ultimate Pet Resolution Summit, which chatted with experts about conflicts over animals. Our conversations were intimate, honest, and illustrated how disagreements over animals occur and how those disagreements can reshape people's lives and relationships. In November 2019, I started Why Do Pets Matter, a new podcast that continued these informative discussions. I'm so excited to have you here with me, continuing my exploration into a more meaningful conversation about why pets matter to all of us. My guests and I will share ideas, stories, and experiences straight from the heart, unscripted and holistic. From the bravest moments to the most brokenhearted, we will explore how to resolve disagreements over animals differently. One thing I know for sure is I want to have more meaningful conversations that will help all of us unlock that deeply felt human-animal bond that drives the emotions of conflict. Hi, everyone. Deborah Hamilton. I'm so glad to be interviewing my friend, Jeff Grognet. He is a veterinarian who 25 years ago decided to pivot a little bit to the left and become an educator in the holistic means of treating our dogs as well as veterinarian purposed care. So I'm so glad you're here, Jeff, and tell us a little bit more about what you do, but not before I ask you our one question, which is, Jeff, why do pets matter to you?
Well, the thing that I've realized, and you don't realize this when you're younger, but you realize it when you get older, pets have an incredible function, purpose, and a reason for being in our lives. And pure and simple, I see them, making lives better all around. And so I saw that in practice. I mean, people were more devoted to their dog than they were their kids. And so with that, it's kind of like, gee, these guys are important. And this is the key. Once you get older and you get your own pets, and this pets can be dogs, cats, iguanas, horses, name all the above. Um, they're all something that really helps us inside. And so because of what I did, and that is I looked after the animals that were looking after the people, I ended up saying, hey, we've really got to take good care of these guys. And that became my focus. And that is rather than just being very simply a mechanistic animal, as in, gee, we have to look after the dogs, cats, and whatever, and we have to do these specific things, on a schedule or something, which is what way a lot of veterinarians do things still. I was looking at it from how can we make their lives better to make our lives better?
That is such a crux of what Why Do Pets Matter means, because they matter because they make our lives better. And you put it beautifully. I love this, that we're looking after the animals who look after us.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
so it's such an important nuanced difference.
Yeah, yeah. We have a responsibility to look after them, and it goes far beyond just the century-old animal welfare definition.
It
Okay.
it it absolutely does. Tell us more.
Yeah. Well, back then, and this was true even 30, 40 years ago. We looked on, as they called them, the five needs of animals, and it was just listed, and one of them was water. I mean, gee, come on, guys, we can do better than that. Um, and so I'm looking at it from the aspect of we need to provide emotional health for our animals. One thing I do is consults on behavior in dogs and cats. And so when you get into that, the old style of behavior was response, or trigger response, as they called it, right? And now we're looking at it more from, gee, what are the intricacies of this behavior, and how can we modify the behavior using passionate methods rather than the ones that were used in the past.
Yeah, the stick and the carrot kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And so you've got that whole revolution of how we're thinking about these animals in front of us. And the thing is, and like I say, I call it the mechanistic way of looking at dogs and cats. And you see this, unfortunately, through a lot of veterinary practices now, is that their push for health of the animals is that you will have a healthy, let's go with dog. You'll have a healthy dog as long as you get vaccinated every year, you keep them on dewormer every month, you feed the diet that, oh, I happen to have on the shelf right behind me, that type of thing. Okay. And that's regarded as the ideal client for those hospitals because they look after their animal the best. And that's what the promotion is for by those veterinarians. And meanwhile, at my practice, we didn't sell prescription food. Our vaccines, we usually got a tray of, you have to buy them as trays of 25. They usually got outdated because we didn't use them all because we were doing what's called a one and done vaccine, as in we weren't doing repeat things every year, 3 years, or whatever years. And also the big one, the toxicity of the insecticides and such that you're putting in for heartworm, deworming, flea control, tick control, all that. It's We're not doing them a service when we're using those products. So we have to look at, I call it the holistic world, and that is what can we do better and steer them away from that defined way of, I call it demonstrating health. Let's do it so that we can actually get health and we got better longevity. And also they're just feeling better the whole time. So that's what we really need.
I love that thought because it's more individualistic for responding to what the pet needs. It's not that, well, you're going to risk them getting heartworm or you're going to risk them having flea dermatitis or something like that, but rather it's on a case by case basis. And correct me if I'm wrong. It's on a case by case basis and seeing what the dogs need. And I know that in my neck of the woods, I take titers on my dogs. I don't generally vaccinate them unless they're low. And I know I live in
Mhm.
the southeast where mosquitoes are the state bird. So we're always worried about heartworm because in the
Mhm.
south it's much more prevalent than in the north where I was from. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that there's a way to create very healthy pets on a more individualized level that won't break the bank, but also will be, hand in hand with things that you monitor to make sure they work.
Yeah, that's it. Here's an example. You brought up heartworm. Okay. I'm in Canada and I'm on the West Coast. And as in the water is just right here, right? That's where I am next to
Now, I
the
saw it on our last discussion and I was very jealous.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is we don't have heartworm here. Okay, so we don't even look at putting dogs on heartworm preventive. There's no requirement. Okay, Eastern Canada, they've had, I'll call it, a few cases. So what happened is that, and I'm gonna move into this. The corporate practices really push the idea of testing and then putting dogs on heartworm preventives. And so in Ontario, so that's the province that's just above the Great Lakes, right there. Okay, that's where the heartworm in Canada is sort of set is, and also in Manitoba to the west of it, where the Mississippi runs out, type of thing. But anyway, here's the key: if you test dogs, there is a 27 times more chance of that test being a false positive than a real one. So what that tells you is that we're going to find dogs that, quote, have heartworm based on the test, but 26 out of 27 of them are actually false positives and they don't have the disease. That gives you an idea how rare that disease really is.
In the
Okay.
north.
you know. And so the point is, do we really need it? The transmission only occurs for about a month, two at the outside. And we've got veterinarians that are saying you have to keep them going all year long. You're keeping a poison in their system all year long.
And
So,
so tell me a little bit more about so that would be in the north, and I agree, if there is very little
mhm,
chance of your dog contracting heartworm and you bring them regularly for testing so that if they have a positive, you retest, so make sure it's maybe not a false positive.
that's right. You got it.
You know,
Yep.
these are the ways that pet owners can advocate for themselves with respect to medications.
Hmm.
And if you live in the South, I'm thinking that maybe the reason you have uptick in heartworm where you do is because the United States tends to move a lot of its southern dogs north who may be infected with heartworm, and then that goes, or am I totally off base? I could be.
No, no, no. You're when that little thing called Hurricane Katrina came
Katrina.
along,
Yeah.
that what was it, 12 years ago? I don't, whatever years ago it was. Um, there was a whole lot of strays from that area that were then distributed throughout the US and Canada. And all of a sudden, we had dogs in northern Canada coming up positive for heartworm.
Yeah.
Here's the key. It wasn't warm enough for the mosquitoes to have the heartworm actually incubate in them so that they could pass it on to another dog. Okay, so that's the cycle blocker right there. In your area, there are still some times when it does get cooler, and now it depends on where along the coast you are, in north,
Yeah,
south,
I'm
and
in
all
North
that stuff.
Carolina, so it never gets cold enough for me, but it can get down to about 28.
28. Okay. Okay, that's lots, or lots cold.
Yeah.
Once the temperature goes below 55 degrees Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
the heartworm life cycle stops in the mosquitoes. They die in the mosquitoes. Okay, so that tells you that as long as the temperature's gone below that level,
Right.
yeah, and your dog is out there, and even though there might be a mosquito coming and feeding off your dog, they are not transmitting heartworm because
Yeah.
the heartworm has died inside that mosquito. Okay, and it also takes you
So it
need.
doesn't take the mosquito dying, it takes the
No,
heartworm within the mosquito to die.
you got it. Yeah. Yeah. So you can have a mosquito biting your dog in January, but it's not warm enough for the heartworm to have matured in the mosquito to be infective to the next dog.
Oh, good. So that's
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 the
something
kicker.
that we don't talk about in vet medicine to clients.
No, we used to. If you go back 35 years or so, when heartworm first really got on the scene, that was one of the major things about it, and that is we had way back in the early 80s.
I remember we used to only put them on from say March when it was starting to get warm in New York until like September, October, and then we would take them off because there were no mosquitoes. And I guess because they probably were mosquitoes, but they weren't incubating heartworm.
You've got it. Yeah. And so the point is, back then, we were actually tailoring it for the environment and the risk to the dog. And now the veterinarians, I mean, when the companies tell them that, yeah, you should be telling people to use it all year long,
Yeah.
what they're actually saying is that, people aren't very good at following instructions. So we want to make sure that we can just keep them on it all month, keep it going, and that's it. Okay.
It
So
just make you feel as if you're doing the right thing for your dog.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So the key is you need to learn about this stuff, and that is find out how much do we have in terms of in terms of the risk to your dog. Now, if you went to one of the Caribbean islands, it probably doesn't get cold enough in Jamaica
Ever.
for heartworm cycle to stop.
Right.
Okay, there we're in trouble. There's no doubt. But here's an example for you. There's a veterinarian I interviewed who is in Pennsylvania, and he has outdoor dogs. And you've ever heard of the Great Pyrenees?
Oh, I love Great Pyrenees. They're
Okay,
beautiful.
okay, great big woolly white dogs, right? they want to be outside,
Yeah.
even where I live, right? They don't want to be in a house. They want to be outside in the elements. Maybe put a roof
That's
on
what
so they
they were
don't get
bred to
wet.
do. That was what they were bred to do. They weren't bred to be,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, this veterinarian at one point, you're gonna love this, had 20 of these guys because he had animals. He had sheep and such, and their job was to protect the sheep.
Right.
Okay. And here's the kicker: Pennsylvania, heartworm territory,
In the
definitely.
summer. Yeah.
Okay. And he did not use heartworm preventive, period. What he did is his dogs were raw fed, as in they were on a completely natural diet and they weren't given any of the preventives at all, for heartworm or regular deworming, any of that. And occasionally he would have a dog into the hospital for different reasons. And what he would do is get them tested for heartworm just in case. Let's just see. Never had one positive. So what does that tell you?
I'm not sure because, Great Pyrenees have really thick coats. I guess the mosquitoes could bite their muzzles. Otherwise, it's really hard for a mosquito to bite a Great Pyrenees, maybe on their ears, because that's less hair as well. But I'm just so for the pet owners who are listening and going, well, I just won't give heartworm to my dogs anymore. There's the caveat of, well, he was a veterinarian and he did spot check his dogs for heartworm when he needed to.
Hmm.
Is there a way for a pet owner in Pennsylvania to work with their veterinarian to have a conversation? Because we did that program for your upcoming equine conference, where how do you talk to your regular mainstream vet about wanting to add a holistic conversation to the discussion of the
Hmm.
full care of your dog. You want
Yeah.
to really educate yourself, like you said, because that's what you're doing now. You're spending most of your time as a veterinarian educating people on what they may want to know, what they probably should know, and how to have that conversation with their veterinarian. So if I'm in Pennsylvania and I have a dog, say an Irish setter, not such a thick coat, which I do have Irish setters, and I had to laugh. I had 24 of them at one point. So I laughed that they weren't doing anything. They were just sleeping on the couches, and we did hunt with them, but that was because we wanted to get different levels of hunting. But some of us are crazy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
but what happens if you have a dog and those dogs were outside all the time because they were working? Um,
Hmm.
they probably were built to be impervious to mosquito bites, maybe. I don't know. What
Yeah.
do you think?
No, no. The point is that they were fed optimally. That's the big part. The key
Know
is
that
this.
veterinarians, mainstream veterinarians hate raw diets, right?
Oh yes, yeah. There's that. They're raw diets are designed to kill dogs, and yeah. But
Well, because sometimes they're too much one way, too much another. You're talking about a
yeah.
balanced diet.
I'm talking about getting them onto a natural whole foods diet, right? As in staying away totally from processed. That's the biggest key there. But the when you talk about hair coat and mosquitoes getting through, I just remember our dog and Courtney. This is our past dog. She was a lab pit bull. Okay, and about 55-pound black jobby sweetie. And I remember one time we were out on the deck and this mosquito came along and landed right on her nose.
Right.
Okay. There's not much hair on the nose of
Nope.
most dogs. Most dogs. All right.
Well, that's a
Eh,
prime mosquito biting area.
Exactly. So any dog can get bitten by mosquitoes, and we actually saw the mosquito land and she was passed out on the deck, right? And both my wife and I were looking and we could almost see the mosquito, go in and go and then leave, right? Which was just great. It was just funny seeing it, and we kept going. Is she gonna wake up? No, she's not gonna wake. She didn't wake up, right? And but the reason we remember that so well is that 20 minutes later, her muscle swelled up. She had an allergic reaction, and if
Oh,
we didn't know about the mosquito, we wouldn't have had a clue what was going on with that dog.
yeah.
Right? It was just one of those funny coincidences when you see it. But anyway, the point is when you're dealing with heartworm in the territories, you're not depending on them not finding the dog. Okay. Now, the key is this. You can use rinses, you can use different things to repel mosquitoes. Okay. And this is where you have to really start thinking about it. When you go out where you are, what is the prime time for mosquitoes?
Well, sundown, right before sundown.
Right. Right, exactly. Right. And so the thing is, when you go out in the morning with your dog and go for a walk, that's not mosquito time. Okay. But if you go out at 4 o'clock or
Yeah.
8 o'clock, look out. Okay. That's where you start tailoring it to the I call it environment in that case, and that is you're going to use something to try to repel those mosquitoes at that time. Okay. So
But you
so
don't
that's
want
what
to
you
use
that's what you want to
anything.
do.
Yeah, you don't want to use anything with perithrines. I remember that, people used to say, well, just dip your dog. And all the shelters in the universe dip the dogs in perithrines to get rid of the fleas and the ticks, because that's what usually happens when they pick up dogs off the street or from not such a great situation.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
huge. I actually have found a holistic soap maker in Beaufort, North Carolina, who has a holistic uh, spray for people, say for people and pets. They're not supposed to lick it, but then I don't put it anywhere where the dogs are going to lick it, but I do put it on their heads. I don't necessarily put it all over their bodies, but I put it on their heads because that's where they come and really annoy. Uh,
Right.
but if you're going to use something on your pet, how do you use it and what would you use that would be not detrimental to the dog? A lot of
Okay.
these wipes, right, are nothing more than perithrines or a DEET, on a
Yeah, yeah, you can use DEET. I hate the smell of it myself. It's one I
my
remember
dog
last
does
time.
too. My
Yeah,
my my sporting dogs hate it.
yeah, no, one time I went out, I was working, it was in a real wet area and there was mosquitoes like all day long. And I had an old thing that my nephew had left with me and I got hold to put a bit of a spray on my neck and just to say, okay, let's do that. Let's see if it's enough. It worked. It
Yeah.
worked beautifully. Okay. But my shirt was smelly and then even the next day after a shower, it's still, gee, I'm still stinking back there. I didn't want to do that. So there's different things you can do, and there's just try to remember her site, canineherbalist.com, and that's Rita, and she has courses on what to do for flea control and such. Okay, but one of the things that she suggested, for example, is making a rinse, and what you do is you make a tea.
Yeah.
So you get the herb, pour boiling water on for 20 minutes or something, and then you put strain it off, or you can just keep it all in the fridge, whatever. Lasts for 3 or 4 days in the fridge. And the idea being is you can spray that on your dog or cat or you, and there's no toxicity. There's no problem at all. And that will repel fleas for sure. Mosquitoes, not too badly. Okay. That type of idea. And then there's a whole world of essential oils.
Yeah.
And the Janet Rourke is her name. So Roar with a K, no E. But Janet, she's a veterinarian, and she has ideas on what you can do for parasite control as well. Right.
It's
So there's different ways to do it.
it's important that people know that. I know that's your mission, is to make sure that people just know and make their own decisions.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, just be aware. And this is the thing that I always talk about with the insecticides. Okay. And they're a real big one now. Probably the biggest selling one at this point is Brevecto. You
Oh my
probably
God.
heard about that.
Don't even start me.
Pardon?
Don't even start me.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, this is the point. Brevecto is a tablet given every 3 months. Okay. And so every 3 months, what you're giving this tablet and the blood level goes up and then it slowly starts coming down, right? But before it gets ineffective, you give another tablet and boom, it goes back up again. Okay. So what you end up with is this long-term poison in your dog's bloodstream or a cat's bloodstream too, that just stays up there. Okay. And it's convenient. It's wonderful. It works. I mean, we got all that
Compliance
stuff.
is good,
Yeah.
because people are they want to be compliant. They want to feel like they're taking good care of their pets.
Right. But here's the question. This is called age adjusted now. You now have a granddaughter that's 2 years old, and the pediatrician says, "Oh, we want to stop her from getting lice when she goes to school, and we've got this tablet that we can give her every 3 months, and it'll prevent her from getting lice when she goes and visits the other kids. And it's so easy, and there's no side effects, and everything's just wonderful with it. Isn't that a great idea?"
Well, I know that when certain things came out for my dogs, I used to say I'd rather treat it Lyme disease was big in our neck of the woods, and they
Oh,
wanted
yes.
me to get a vaccination for Lyme disease. And I said, well, I'm just not sure I want to put that in my dog because then they'll always test positive. I said, so I'll never know. And is it really foolproof or not? And I'd rather treat it when it shows its ugly head, which it did several times. Now, this might be ridiculous thinking. However, I wanted to treat it when it came, not treat it. And I'm usually the kind of person who wants to head everything off at the pass. Yet I stopped
Yeah.
and thought this isn't necessarily something I want to put in my dogs along with, all the other, parvo and vaccinations that I feel are helpful, especially for young puppies and young dogs.
Hmm.
But there are
Okay.
different ones that I think we can say, well, maybe I'll wait and treat it when it comes. If you live in an area, I guess, that is high risk, you might make a different discussion or a different choice. But mine was sort of a mid-risk area.
Okay. Okay. Well, the Lyme disease is a really controversial one, and this is the thing that most people aren't told either, and that is with Lyme disease. And let's think about.
And there are so many different tick-borne diseases. I actually sat in on a
Oh, yeah.
a conference where the vet talked about all the tick-borne diseases and you didn't come away with saying, oh, you had to use Bravecto. Rather, he was like you, educating the veterinarians on all the different kinds of tick-borne diseases that dogs and or people could come down with. And I said, holy Toledo, this is this is scary.
Yeah. No, ticks are not our friend. There's no doubt about that. Okay. But the main thing is Lyme disease. It's transmitted by ticks to your dog. Okay. And the numbers kind of differ depending on the study, but somewhere between 96 and 98% of dogs, if they get Lyme disease, they blow it off. They might get a day where they've got a bit of a fever that you don't even notice or something. But otherwise, they mount an immune response, they get rid of it, and they're fine. They're done. Okay. Way back in the 80s, that was when the test for Lyme disease was invented. And the way they invented it was a test for antibodies to Lyme disease. So
So if
it
they were
called,
fighting it, you had it.
well, what it said is if you're positive on that test, oh, and this is the problem initially. If you're positive, it means you got Lyme disease. No, it means you had Lyme disease. Big difference there, right? Because all you're testing is antibodies, and that's the 4DX test. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you have to do another C3 test, like a confirmatory test. At least we've got that now, rather than just saying, because back in the 80s, they were doing that test for antibodies and saying, oh, it's really high. We need to put your dog on antibiotics. Well, hold it, back up, back up. It's high because the dog's responding well. It's
Yeah,
getting rid
he's
of the
fighting it on his own,
it's getting
right?
rid of the disease, right? And so the point is this: if you've got 96% of dogs that are given Lyme disease, just kind of go and get rid of it. Okay. Well, as we call it, what's our preventable fraction? Okay. Which means only about 4% of dogs will benefit from the vaccine.
Right.
And then the flip side is the thing they talk about that's scary with Lyme disease is it's called Lyme nephritis. It's a kidney infection generated by Lyme disease. Okay. There's a genetic susceptibility, and the vaccine doesn't work very well to prevent it anyway. Oh, okay. So what are we actually preventing here?
Yeah,
Okay.
we think we are, but we aren't necessarily. And it it is something that gives people peace of mind when they maybe should be doing a better job of screening the parents of the dogs who are susceptible to that nephritis.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but we don't know even know the genetics of it. It's just assumed that way. I mean, we don't have a test. that we
Yeah,
can test a
I know
dog.
there's a lot of non-tests for things that happen genetically to dogs. We and Irish setters had PRA, and we developed a test which was great, except for one of my
Mhm.
girlfriend's dogs tested clear 3 generations and went blind. So he's an
Yeah.
anomaly. So tests are good, but they are not dispositive.
No, no test is 100%. There's always exceptions to the test. That's where the problem lies, right? So anyway, the thing is, when you're dealing with the vaccines, the and you brought up titers. I'll just hit that for a
I did,
second.
yes, yes.
With titers, the first off, a titer is a measure of the antibodies to a specific disease in the bloodstream. In
Mhm.
other words, you do a blood test and you measure for dogs, what's the parvo level? Okay. For horses, what's the WEE level? And then for cats, panleukopenia level. Okay. They're all specific for the animal. Okay. And so the main thing is we do the titer. And what's happened since titers were sort of came on the scene is that veterinarians, pushed by their clients, were then saying, oh, rather than doing a vaccine, we can do a titer. And if it's high enough, we can then say we don't need to vaccinate. So it became a replacement for vaccines. Okay. And yeah, and some vets are titering every year. And some are doing it every 3 years or something like that. This is the key. When you do a titer, what it tells you is that the immune system has responded to that disease, that antigen. Okay. So in other words, if you've got a good parvo titer in your dog, it means the immune system has generated antibodies to kill off parvo. Period. That's it. Okay. And what's going to happen is if you vaccinate, the level will go up, and then over time it decays. Okay. And there's a specific rate that it decays at. And the kicker is this: if that dog has not been vaccinated or been exposed to the disease, that level will keep going down. It never goes to quite zero, but it becomes undetectable on the regular tests. Okay. But this is the key. You have something called memory in your immune system. Okay. So, question for you, Deborah, and that is, when was the last time you were vaccinated for polio?
Yeah, I think I was probably 4 or 5,
Yeah,
and I
you're
think it
you're
was a
very
drink. I'm so old, I think it was a drink.
yeah. Actually, it's the one where well, I got was a little scratch on the arm.
Yeah, no, I think I drank mine. I
You
think,
drank yours.
between
Okay.
58 to 63, I think they were in the sugary drinks. They used to put it on the sugar pill or whatever it was, and that would
Oh,
make
put
it
it
go.
on sugar cube.
Yep,
That's what you're talking about. Okay. Okay. So anyway, the point is, you haven't had many boosters, have you?
none.
Bingo. And the reason for that is when you expose a body to a vaccine, the immune system says, "Hey, there's something, we got to kill that thing," right? And then you actually have cells produced that their goal is to produce antibodies
Alleviate
parvo,
that. Yeah.
to parvo, okay? They stay for the life of the animal. That's what we call memory, immunologic memory. Okay. So
Well,
even at my age, if I got exposed to polio, those cells would be in my body saying, I remember that from 60 something years ago. Let's get back to work. Boom,
yeah.
and the level goes up, right? So this is the whole point with the titers. Then this is what I did in my practice with dogs. We'll pick dogs. I did a vaccine at 16 weeks. I did a titer a month later. That confirmed that the vaccine worked.
Yeah, because they have the high antibodies.
Yeah. And then, period. We don't need to retest the titer because we've proven the immune system's on board. And we don't need to do another vaccine because we proved the immune system's on board.
And
That is not, and every veterinarian that went through vet school, most of them did, took a course in immunology. And I mean, I did one. I think it was in second year, from what I remember. And in immunology, we're taught about this whole concept of memory and stuff like that. And then when we get to fourth year, where it's called the clinical rounds, then we get the clinicians that tell us that, oh yeah, don't worry about that stuff. What we're when I graduated, it was, and you have to give vaccines every year because the immunity falls down. But those guys told us, no,
Wait a
don't listen
minute.
to
Two
that
years
stuff.
ago. Yeah. Wait a minute. 2 years ago.
Don't
Yeah.
listen to that stuff.
I
Okay.
hear you.
Okay. And unfortunately, the ones who are continue saying that you need to keep up these booster ideas are the ones selling
The
vaccines
boosters.
to the veterinarian.
Yeah. They're the
Okay.
ones selling the boosters.
Yeah, but there's no other education for the veterinarians to get. So
Well,
unless you do what I did, and that is you start questioning this whole process, and then you start thinking, I got to get some information from other places.
self-education.
That opens you up, and that's the difference between conventionally raised and then conventionally gone holistic raised.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's sort of like my litigation intermediation thought process. So litigation was great, and I was a big litigator, and then I realized, wait a minute, everybody gets destroyed in litigation, and maybe I should try to help people have a conversation with a neutral that holds a safe space. So you're holding a safe space for people to just educate themselves on what it is they may want to know, may need to know, may want to choose to do, and how that would support them, and how you would support their education, because you've got some great stuff out there that people can read about. You know, I've never gotten the feeling that I had to do what you told me to do, Jeff, but you would plant a seed and say, well, just read about this or just think about this. And I think that there are two things that I find really important in your work. One is that you spur our curiosity on what if I thought about that, and what if I did that? And then, of course, um, creating programs that will help you understand more from practitioners. I think that's really, really
Mhm.
important, because you're doing a new
Yeah.
one for equine owners and some practitioners, but you also do it for the basic pet owner, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. My conferences that I've done, I started out with dogs and cats, and then earlier this year I did one on horses because I had a co-host, and she said, "Why don't we do one on horses?" And, she'd been a guest on my talking about dogs, and so she teaches tapping. If in case you ever heard of that
I
one.
love tapping. Yep.
Okay, she
That's
teaches tapping.
controversial too, unless you've been.
Oh yeah, of course it is. And anything that's
Yeah.
holistic is
Yeah.
controversial. Okay. But anyway, the point is that I did the horse thing, and then the biggest question that came up during that conference was, you don't have anyone speaking about vaccines. Yeah, you're right. I don't. Okay, but that led to me, bingo, July 8th. That's when we have the the conference coming out on equine vaccines and holistic care, right? So we've got lots of information on vaccines, and this is the key. I I did the conference, but then I also did a secondary interview of every speaker asking, what vaccines do you do in your horses?
Yeah.
So now, and I'm putting that together as an ebook as well. So I'm going to have this incredible resource for people to be able to go, gee, I'm really wondering what I should do. Oh, look at that. Deborah she has the same number of horses with me in the same situation. What does she do?
Yeah.
Bingo. Okay.
Yeah, just social proof. And we're going to put the link to that July 8th conference, so that if you'd like to attend, you can attend and learn more, whoever you are, whether you're a
Okay.
veterinarian or a horse owner, or just a pet owner who wants to know more. I mean, horses aren't so different from cats and dogs, a little, much bigger. If they step on your foot, it really hurts.
Yeah.
But there are things that you can learn, and you can join the community, which is a wonderful community, really welcoming and not judgmental. So it's not like you would feel as if, I mean, that's what
Mhm.
I have found in the community, uh just learning about things and making your choices. It doesn't mean that you're um not going to take vaccinations again. It's just that maybe you'll understand them better, and you'll have that conversation with your mainstream veterinarian, and maybe you'll help them learn
Yeah.
to explore, right? Jeff, that's
Yeah.
what you do. You teach veterinarians and pet owners to explore.
Yeah. My main message on that is you have options. And a lot of people don't discover that until all of a sudden they've got a horse with cancer, a dog with kidney problems, or diabetes or something. It's kind of like, oh, I wish I knew this stuff before. I know, And so the key is let's learn it now. It's kind of like you and me, and that is, gee, let's do this my model. 66. I now, and let's assume I don't exercise. I'm 50 pounds overweight, and my diet is mainly fries with gravy on and stuff like that. I know, based on that picture, I'm the poster child for diabetes
Yeah.
and heart problems, and name the list, right?
Yeah, and orthopedic issues from the extra weight, right?
Yeah, all that stuff. Oh yeah, my knees hurt. All that stuff.
So that's
So
our dogs too.
yeah, and that's the point. And that is, we see dogs and cats fed commercial foods. I love this. The pet food manufacturers are saying, "Hey, we've got this epidemic of obesity going, where 60% of dogs are overweight, but we have a diet that could help them lose weight." Hold it back, and this is where I go back up. Rather than using one of those diets that created the problem in the first place, why don't we feed the real way and get these guys actually healthier? Okay.
Yeah.
And you've got exactly the same thing going on in horseland, and that is there's diets that are being pushed commercially, and I found that out with the first conference I had. I had some veterinarians just down on those things, saying, "Hey guys, it's just high sugar and it's got all this stuff. We're going to have problems with our horses, right?" So you got to learn. You got to learn
Yeah,
what
short
you
term,
should be
long
doing.
term. You've got to learn whether or not it may help them because they, are coming out of a feedlot, say, and you've rescued them, and that's one kind of diet you may have to try. And then if they're in your life working every day, because that's what you do, sort of like the dogs, you ride your horse every day because you're out on that's another kind of diet. Jeff, I could stay here with you forever because I love the information you're sharing. Where can people find you, and where can people find the information about the new July 8th, excuse me, program that you're putting on? I'm
If,
in January. I wish I was. It's so hot here.
Yeah, simple. If you go to my main site, it's www.newearthvet.com. It's all one word. And you'll see links for there. And if you just join the newsletter, you'll be getting notifications on what's coming out and when. Before the conference, actually, I'll be putting it up in the next day. You're going to see the announcement about the horse conference July 8th, and you can register for that. It's free, 7 days, 3 webinars every day. And so that way you can bump up your horse knowledge real fast.
Yeah, and for full disclosure, I was asked by Jeff to be on simply to have a conversation about how to have that conversation with your mainstream vet, because it can
Mhm.
sometimes get to be difficult to have the conversation with your mainstream vet about wanting to add holistic information and maybe things to do differently. So I highly
Mhm.
recommend, I mean, it's free, guys. You can learn so much. Why not go to newearthvet.com so you can find out more about this, Jeff? Thank you so much. I'm going to love to have you on after the conference to see what we've learned, and to also keep this conversation going, because I think it's intimidating for a pet owner to have this conversation with a mainstream veterinarian, and it's intimidating for a mainstream veterinarian to really have this conversation, even though they might want to know more. It's
Yeah.
not really
The
what the practice is.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem we have is that this is the issue. Both sides think they're right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is, and let's do the extremes. You've got someone who says, "I never do vaccines. They're toxic, they kill, and all this stuff." Okay. So that's one extreme. And then you've got the other one, I'll call it the white coat extreme, that says, "Oh, vaccines are safe, effective, and we give them every year." It's almost like a religion for both sides. And so the main thing with that is creating some space where both of them are able to talk. Okay. And now,
And
in
find
some
where they have
cases,
common ground, right? And
yeah,
that's what I do. I help people find where they have common ground, and that's what you're talking about. It's not one extreme or the other. It's let's do what's best for this pet here today in front of us.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But what you're going to find is that some veterinarians are amenable to listening to your view. Other ones aren't.
Yeah.
Okay. And when we're dealing with dogs and cats, and you have veterinarians that just have there's and this is the problem we have. We have some veterinarians that say, "Oh, if you don't get your dog vaccinated for rabies, I can't see your dog anymore." Whoa. Okay. Or we go on the food. If you're feeding your dog raw food, you can't bring your dog in for surgery at my hospital. Okay. And when you're dealing with that type of thing, that's called, I guess we have to adjust where we're going, because that's their policy now, and such. And what's happening is, compared to the olden days when I first started as a vet, now veterinarians are ultra busy and they're not crying for customers.
They're
And
overwhelmed.
until that happens,
This
some
is,
of them
yeah.
will not be bending their rules.
No. And you're right. And you're right. Love to
Yeah.
have you back to talk about that, because for me, it is so important. That's what I do for a living, help people have difficult conversations. It's so important
Yeah.
to enable people to do what they feel is right for their pet, without across the board, as you said, all or nothing. It really is
Mhm.
a case of
Yep.
educating the owner, and also educating the veterinarian and the medical staff. So, Jeff, until next time, thank you so much for coming
Yep.
on. For everyone who's listening, I'm so glad you're here. Kiss your babies for me. This is Deborah Hamilton, and this is the Why Do Pets Matter podcast. Please like and share if this has been a wonderful podcast for you. And I can't wait to see you until next time.